Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the moderator for the event, and I welcome you. We have a great webcast on tap today. As you can see, we have 5 fabulous faces staring back at you. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to access it on demand later on. We'll be sending out a link via email later on that will take you to the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during the presentation you have a question for any of our panelists, just go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel. And then we'll take about 10 minutes near the end of the presentation and go over any audience questions. And also know that our audience, or sorry, our panelists will be receiving a copy of the questions also afterwards. So plenty of opportunity to get your questions answered. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is 5 years of Jenkins and DevOps trends and what this means for the future of the industry. So as I said before, we have some really great panelists here today to share their insights. To the immediate left is Kristen Baskett, who's Senior Solutions Architect at CloudBees, and she's actually going to be driving the conversation today. Next to her is Josh Nixdorf, who is Group Technical Director at Electronic Arts. Next to Josh is Curtis Yanko, Director of Strategy at Sonatype. And to his left, or to his right on the screen, is Tracy Miranda, Director of Open Source Community at CloudBees. And finally, all the way to the right is Lester Fairley, who's DevOps Practice Director. Thank you all for joining me today. A great group of panelists. I can't wait to get into the conversation. So Kristen, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. So hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Baskett. I am the Senior Solutions Marketing Manager. I'm not the architect, but maybe I'll get a promotion. So Senior Solutions Marketing Manager here at CloudBees, and I am thrilled to kick us off today for this fabulous panel discussion around some of the key trends that are emerging from the DevOps and Jenkins Community survey that we just finished for this year. So before we dig in, I'd like to just take a few minutes to let our great panelists introduce themselves. So Tracy, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Hi, everybody. So I'm Tracy Miranda. I'm the Director of Open Source Community at CloudBees. And that means I have the privilege of working very closely with the Jenkins and the Jenkins X communities, which is, at this moment in time, a really exciting place to be.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. Curtis, you want to go next?
Sure. So like the title, Director of Strategy and Alliances at Sonatype, but prior to that, I've done some sales roles with them and marketing roles. I also ran a DevOps Center of Enablement at a Fortune 100 company prior to coming to Sonatype.
Great, thanks, Curtis. Josh?
Hi, Josh Nixdorf. I'm the Group Technical Director for the Development and Release Engineering team at Electronic Arts. Today is actually my 12th anniversary at the company. Thank you. Development and Release Engineering, or DRE as we often call it, basically provides the central CI services for the majority of the dev teams. And as we've been changing the way we make games, enabling more CD, we've been facilitating that transition for games as well.
Great. And then last but certainly not least, Lester?
Congratulations, Josh. Anyway, I'm Lester Fairley. I'm a DevOps consultant for Zivra. We specialize in doing DevOps implementations at client sites, focusing on building out CI/CD pipelines and helping increase automation for our end users.
Great. So now that we know each other a little bit better, we can go ahead and get started. The first thing I wanted to cover actually is our survey contestant winners. So every year that we do this survey, we randomly select 2 survey respondents to receive a prize from us at CloudBees. And this year's winners are Srikanth Penuganda and Bob Hankis. Srikanth will be getting the first place prize, which is a free pass to DevOps World, Jenkins World next year. So woohoo. And Bob will be getting a $100 Amazon gift card. So congrats, gentlemen. Hopefully you guys are tuned in, and we'll be reaching out to you very soon with more details. So let's kick off this discussion. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the survey. This is actually our 5th year doing this survey, which really makes the analysis a lot more fun because we have enough data to do some interesting trend analysis, some of which we'll be sharing today. And every year we get about 1,000 responses to this survey. So historically, we've had insights from 5,000 of all you folks, some more than once, obviously. And this year we tipped the scales at 1,076 responses, which ironically is nearly tied with the number of people registered for this webinar. So congratulations, it looks like you all came back to see the results, which is awesome. So let's take a look at some of these survey demographics. So it's a very global survey. We had 77 different countries represented this year. And in line with past surveys, the majority of the responses came to the United States, with the other top countries being Germany, UK, India, France. And France was interesting this year, actually a higher percentage than the UK, which may have had something to do with us hosting DevOps World, Jenkins World in Nice this year for our European show. So good representation there. And for the first time, we asked the industry where they work, and we found some interesting things. The top 5 industries for Jenkins users are software, no surprise there, IT, financial, healthcare, automotive, and then banking. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the demographics of this group. But where this starts to get really neat is here, where we asked folks how many IT professionals are in your entire organization, and 39% said that you're in organizations over 1,000. So last year when we asked the same question, stats came in at like 20.65% were in organizations of that size. So Tracy, this question is for you. It seems like more large companies are using Jenkins in pursuit of DevOps. Does that match what you're seeing?
Yes, no, absolutely, Kirsten. And we're seeing a lot of folks from those companies as well join us. So at Jenkins World Contributor Summit, we had some great folks from Adobe there and just talking about the massive scale they're operating at. At one of the London Jams, Capital One, we're talking about what they're doing. And for those companies, it seems to come down to 2 things. Like, one is just the sheer power of Jenkins. It's just kind of the most powerful CI/CD out there. And then the other thing they talk a lot about is just the flexibility. So let's say in Capital One's case, they can have PCI compliant pipelines or non-PCI, and it just sort of works. Jenkins gives them that flexibility they need. So certainly serving, the needs of these big organizations really well.
Fantastic. We also noticed some changes in the roles of respondents. So this was interesting data too. 57% report themselves as DevOps professionals. And this is up over 15% last year. So Curtis, let's start with you. I know that there are a couple of people who wanted to weigh in on this one, but give us your insights. What are your thoughts on the increase in these DevOps roles? Why are we seeing more people self-identify as quote unquote DevOps professionals?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with it being the top search term on Indeed. And right now, while a lot of people chafe at the idea of DevOps in a title, it's how you get noticed and how you get called and how you get opportunities. So I think it's unsurprising that lots of people are identifying with it.
I also wanted to add, I think one of the reasons that we're seeing it is, as a consulting firm, we actually go into companies and suggest they build out a DevOps organization, identify titles with those positions, those roles or responsibilities, so that you carve out your niche and that you're not just, the production guy who's actually doing DevOps, or you're not a lead developer who's actually doing the CI pipelines, things like that. There is actually roles for you in your organizations, and we help clients identify those roles and kind of try to break them out in a DevOps organization.
Great. So moving on to how the community is using Jenkins. So in 2016, Jenkins pipeline, since 2016, we've seen rapid adoption with Jenkins pipeline, increasing from 38% in 2016 to 50% in 2017 to 75% this year. And the community metrics that we track seem to follow this trend as well. So we are now seeing 4.6 million jobs this year as of November, which is 3 times what it was this time last year. So Lester, this question is for you. Working in the field with customers adopting Jenkins and DevOps, are you seeing Jenkins pipeline playing a more important and prevalent role?
We definitely are. So in our experience, clients have been picking up on Jenkins and CI type pipelines but they've been just sticking their toes in the water and not necessarily going full bore. Once they've proven out that it works and that it actually does increase efficiency and there's a lot of gains there, you see them starting to implement faster and faster. And I think that's what you're seeing now is, yes, we've tried this for the last couple of years. The technology has now hit a tipping point and is being implemented across all platforms and even more legacy systems as you go.
Great. So in this next question, we asked about what people are automating with Jenkins, with 70% or more respondents indicating that they're automating things like build, test, release, and deployment with Jenkins. It looks like most people get it, that those are the most popular use cases. However, just 35% are automating reporting and metrics, and only 23% and 18% respectively are automating tasks around security and governance. Curtis, these numbers are low, but it indicates that folks are starting to think about automation of other types of tasks such as reporting, security, governance. Any thoughts on this progress?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying it's disheartening to see such a low number on security. Maybe this just represents maturity, right? So the low-hanging fruit, if you will, are the things that are getting done at the top of this chart. But I also think it gives credence to why the term DevSecOps has come to rise to sort of specifically spike out that they're invited to this game as well, and maybe that's part of why that lags.
Yeah, thinking back to what Lester just said, like when I look at these numbers, I see internally we have a really healthy mix of build and test, and we've started seeing more static analysis, even just general batch jobs. But I guess tying it back, it's setting that expectation for what good looks like. Even my team, as I said, we help across a variety of game titles. If we happen to acquire a new studio or spin up a new location, they often are doing it on their own for a little while, and then if they stumble, something happens, they end up hitting a stability issue. The company isn't used to that. Hey, how come you're not able to deliver a game for the execs to play? Nobody else has that problem. They deal with these guys. And so I guess, like I said, tying that point nicely, I think part of the reason you see these other ones grow slowly is once you stop having build problems, people take notice and go, okay, why is the build stability so high? Why is the test? And I think this is a bit of the sort of, as silly as it sounds, this to me looks like a natural progression sort of out from that core developer experience. They care about their build times and their tests and their deployments, and I don't know, the batch job is someone else's problem, and security may or may not be ours. And so it builds out. I mean, for our example, governance is the one that I'm the most interested in right now. As a company, we want to be able to accelerate the way we can release our games, and part of what we're able to do to add a lot of value is just the internal processes, marketing, user experience, play testing, all sorts of things. Those aren't necessarily in the governance field, but like we haven't thought about how to really build that into the big cycle. Normally we have a year to do it, and so I think we're going to find our numbers follow this pattern, but continue to grow every single year until they're all near 100%.
Yeah, as one of the things I was going to say, trends as well we're seeing in the community is that, like, I don't know how people are answering the security question in this, but specifically on security scans, that's probably one of the areas where we've got the most plugins emerging over the past year or so. So I expect that will go up as I say, DevSecOps becomes more of a thing, and there's a lot of focus.
Fantastic. So the next question we asked, we really expanded this year's survey to dig deeper into DevOps process and practices, and what we uncovered were some pretty interesting things. And we asked, what does your organization practice? And interestingly, 67% report that they are practicing DevOps, yet only 49% say that they're practicing CD. So Lester, let's open this question up with you. We've always felt that CD is an absolutely required thing to effectively practice DevOps. So why are we seeing this gap? Is it still due to a lack of clear definition of what DevOps actually is, or is it something else?
I think that what we're seeing is companies are comfortable automating their pre-production environments, and going to the final step of deployment to production is where they're kind of drawing the line. And there's several reasons for that. One of it might be we want to do more performance testing or security scanning, or add some layers on that we're not doing earlier, and get the change management boards involved to sign off for that final push to production. So you're not actually seeing it as part of the pipeline. Not everyone could be the Netflix and the Facebooks of the world where they're doing 6,000 pushes a day and the change goes through automatically. There's still a lot of organizational inertia to overcome, and legacy thoughts. So if you take a bank, for example, that has financial big dollars involved, they want to make sure that that's tested very well, and they're not necessarily willing to go the full CD path yet. But we're seeing more and more companies pick that up as we go along.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think that the really important thing that resonates there is those pre-production environments. I think part of that as well is internal environments. We have a lot of internal systems that are probably much closer, well, not probably, they definitely are much closer to fitting into that CD pattern than the packaged goods themselves are. And so I know, when we answer questions like this, we generally score ourselves pretty low on CD because the big thing we do doesn't do that. But it's easy to sort of overlook a lot of that small stuff.
Great.
Well, actually, one question for the rest of the panelists. Do you think we have good definitions of continuous delivery and continuous deployment that are sort of well understood in the industry?
I mean, I think we even saw it on the thread, right? When we were talking about the 49%, we just called it CD. I think the definitions to me are reasonably clear, but when we have a conversation, we often use the abbreviation and then we instantly lose cohesion. It's easy to be talking about one with someone who thinks you're talking about the other.
Yeah, I think the definitions are pretty solid. It's just, I am a little stunned to see continuous delivery so low. I mean, deployment, I get, it's hard. It's not for everybody. But there's too much of a gap in delivery, which is simply getting some value out of your pipeline and sitting there waiting.
Actually, if I can put a question to the panelists, it's a contest now apparently. Actually help me understand, what you just said there, Curtis, because like in our case, I recognize that I'm frequently giving a game artifact to, the testers to be able to actually play, enjoy, test for fun. So in a game paradigm, it makes sense like this pattern, but what you just said, how does that fit for, more conventional software?
I don't know. I feel like in the insurance industry, we were able to, continuous delivery is just about getting it through all of your gates and out waiting for the business to pull it in, right? So I don't know. It just seems like that's the easy one. It's, if you're doing DevOps, you got to at some level be doing the delivery piece, and so that discrepancy is a head scratcher for me.
So kind of continuing on in this vein, we also wanted to understand how the community is working. So we asked about some things that impact developer and delivery velocity. And what we found was that just 14% are merging code into the trunk with every change, and just 9% are deploying each change into production. So Tracy, let's start with you. CI/CD purists often encourage a mainline development approach. With that in mind, what do these numbers mean to you?
Yeah, doing the right thing is hard, I think. But yeah, we're seeing I think like the DORA, State of DevOps report is always sort of saying the elite teams are the ones who are kind of doing trunk-based development, short-lived branches. So it's really interesting to see that while we've got these best practices that have been established, that they just these aren't translating for people out there. So I think this comes down to, again, just sort of culture, maybe the code bases themselves, and yeah, thinking about, well, maybe how as communities can we move to getting those improvements. So yeah, I'm surprised by the numbers.
Yeah, I think to your point.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, to Tracy's point about the code bases, I know that's something I think is pretty common to the games industry, is the far left there, that every change, the integration cost ends up being so expensive just due to the size of those code bases that it's, I don't know that, maybe some of the teams would think of themselves as elite teams and doing it with intention, but a lot of times it's simply required just due to the magnitude.
So Curtis, I was going to kind of pile on here with you. What do you think about the fact that only 9% are practicing continuous deployment of every change to production?
Well, like we alluded to earlier, like Lester did, it's hard. That you can't just sort of take your old monolith and suddenly be doing continuous deployment culturally or technologically. So there's a lot of barriers there. So, blue, green, and Canary, some of these things are a real challenge that don't fit current architectures. So I sort of get it. I think what we might even be losing sight of a little bit is if these traditional Big Bang deploys are still, if they're A, automated, and B, they have rollback capabilities, that represents probably a pretty big win for a lot of folks. It puts them in a much better place than they were when they were doing those Big Bangs off of Excel spreadsheets and manually sort of doing step by step as they went.
Great. So yeah, we are seeing here that 52% are still using this Big Bang deployment methodology, and Blue, Green, and Canary, and some of these more modern options are lagging behind. Blue, Green at 26% and Canary at 15%. So Josh, for you, is this a red flag? Is it indicating that we're not quite as mature as we think we are, or is this just a reality of how apps need to be deployed?
I think it's a bit of a reality, but building off what Curtis said, I think a lot of this is it's transitionary, right? I think there's a lot of Big Bang is the way a lot of this stuff was done, but re-architectures need to happen. Change needs to take place in order for things to be able to take advantage of that. I can use games as the example. Games is a really fun industry to be in for this type of stuff, because the classic game release, especially to consoles, Big Bang is the model. We're more like entertainment companies in that regard, that we want the big release the day, we want you lining up at the stores, right? Like, it's an important part of the process. But unlike classic entertainment companies like movies, we have the benefit of being software as well. So we can kind of deliver something that it's not that it's not quite done, but like where we haven't fully baked everything. We might want to put it 80% of the way out, see what people think of it, and then deliver content the way they actually want it. And so we have, I think, a lot of desire, and you've seen this with the mobile industry, you see it with the online games already, but there's just this really exciting opportunity to sort of, find a place where really only games can fit by being able to somewhat take advantage of the Big Bang. And so you still want to shock and awe people, right? Drum up that excitement, but still be able to do things like, Blue, Green, Canary, this stuff, so that you can test these things and actually meaningfully not just finish that game, but provide that content, the content that people actually want, before you've had to go all in on it.
Sure.
I think that would be an interesting question for next year or for going forward, is who, if you're doing a Big Bang approach, are you looking at re-architecting your application? Is it in the process? Because I know in our experience, as we go into larger clients, we've seen, banks starting to address some of that. Well, I don't want the monolithic approach anymore, so I want to start breaking off into smaller services and things like that. And you're seeing companies actually spend a lot of time starting to re-architect, and it'd be interesting to see what kind of percentages you got on that.
Yeah, and going forward, I would say, as we're seeing more things with microservices, we're starting to see folks in the community talk about different types of processes and practices emerging, things like GitOps, which works really well for kind of small chunks of code where you can kind of push code constantly out throughout the week, and then different approaches as well on the delivery, so just more focused on kind of a blast radius of releasing things. So you're getting some feedback before you decide, you're going to roll out to a bigger area. But yeah, again, it really is going to depend on the industry and the type of software.
But I think one thing that we do see common across that is, the developers, the DevOps people, however you want to, classify yourself. Generally, these types of continuous releases it's not just that they're better for them, but like it's easier. It's become the modern way of doing it. Frankly, I think we have a hiring challenge finding people who kind of want to deploy the monolith. And so that's part of the reason, I think, to actually push forward through this.
Great. So I think that is a good segue into the tools and technology conversation, actually, because we're going to talk about containers and microservices. So we asked folks this year, what container technologies are you using? And, we've all kind of heard that Kubernetes has sort of taken off this year and been declared the winner of the container orchestration wars. And, that's what we have found this year. But we also found that as far as container kernel technology goes, Docker is the clear favorite at 78%, with Kubernetes being used for that orchestration piece at 46%. And this is growing very rapidly, by the way. So this is over double the 20% of folks using Kubernetes last year. So the adoption is really quite staggering. So in regards to how containers are used, 38% of folks are using them in pre-production, so that's dev through test, while 34% are using them all the way through production. And this is an increase over the 22% using containers in production last year. So Curtis, this one's for you. What do you feel has driven the increase of containers being used in production? Is it related to the adoption of microservices? Is it better tooling or something else?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of factors, as is almost always generally the case. But I would say the notable ones, and this is an area where, I spend a lot of my time in my work looking at these technologies and how they're shaping, customers' desires and behaviors. But the big one was we're about a year past Kubernetes sort of becoming the de facto winner as an orchestration or provisioning tool. And that was a big deal, I think, because it made it safe for corporate America to know where to sort of invest. And so I think you combine that with the maturation of the Docker technology. And I think a lot of people have been kicking it around for a while and are starting to get comfortable with the types of changes it imposes upon you and the types of behaviors it starts to push you into. And so I think those things have come together, and I think we're seeing a real explosion in adoption in the last year. And I wouldn't be surprised if this number doubles again next year in a similar survey.
Yeah, I know. I think I was at Jenkins World a couple of years ago where we were talking about containers, and I remember being like, isn't that just kind of the same deal as a VM? I'm not really sure what that value is. And I really had to eat that hat this year because it's not just that it's exploded everywhere, but we've started understanding internally how we can really start improving some of those environments. A perfect example is the consoles we develop on are more like embedded systems. You're writing highly optimized code to do very specific things for the metal that it's on. And we would regularly have engineers that might be writing some type of client code, but also regularly writing server code. And so unless they want to have multiple machines, they end up having mixed environments. And containers has been a really fantastic way of shifting sort of that end state environment all the way up. So now they're able to do something that is way more confidently happening, similarly to what it would in the production environments.
Very cool. It's kind of a scary thought that Amazon ECS is kind of looking like legacy now.
I think one of the things we see as we implement, cloud solutions too, is that the container technologies are tied to that before you even start. You don't start looking at doing cloud deployments or things like that without already having a Kubernetes or a Docker in mind, right? So that technology is hand in hand with the new push to cloud. Versus legacy world, you're seeing it, you used to just deploy however, drop an ear file, war file, wherever, and somebody could just write a script and do it. And the technology, the tool wasn't part of that. But you don't see the differentiation today as much. You're not just pushing manually to cloud ever. You've always been automated. And this is just kind of reflecting that, I think, as you see cloud adoption going up as well.
Yeah,
really.
and there's a ton of appeal here because Docker gives you portability, right? So that's one of the real promises of Docker is it's very portable, and then that portability becomes real across cloud providers with something like Kubernetes, right? So that's why that confluence is we'll see this just continue to go nuts, and I think the only dust left to settle is which container runtime you're going to really settle on, or bits and pieces of the container stack.
So I was going to say I really couldn't ask for a better segue into the next slide, because we will be talking now about cloud technology. So, as we look over the last 5 years of trends, we've seen a really clear increase in cloud adoption, and not only for CI/CD tools, but also in production. So 73% of folks are hosting Jenkins on a cloud platform, and you can see I've got the breakdown for private, public, and hybrid here on the screen, while 61% are deploying applications to cloud infrastructure. So I'd like to put a community lens on this for just a minute. Tracy, the Jenkins community has recently released Jenkins X, as well as announced a huge commitment to other cloud native initiatives like the Evergreen project. Can you speak to the community's commitment to the cloud and why the cloud is so important in our future going forward strategy?
Yeah, no, big shift to the cloud. And, I think we're going to start seeing that we're drilling down into different flavors of cloud. So if you take something like Evergreen, which is, automatic updating distribution, that's got a flavor for AWS. So it will use cloud storage and dynamically provision agents. And then when we talk about, let's say, cloud native, just kind of this rapid elasticity, then that's where Jenkins X comes in. Oh, I think it's pronounced Jenkins X. And that is, not just cloud native, but I guess Kubernetes native. But what we're seeing is there's different options as well. So we've got cloud native Jenkins coming out, just throw some more things out there. But for people who are using Jenkins but not quite ready to go fully cloud native, that's kind of the stepping stone. So if you're ready for Jenkins X and you can move all your workloads into it, that's a good option. And then to top it off on top of that, we've also got like serverless Jenkins, which is much more to do with ephemeral masters that can come and go. And really the scary thing is that has all evolved over the last year. So the whole space is changing so quickly. And I think Jenkins is just going to stay relevant and give all these different options of, serverless, cloud native, Jenkins X, just as different options. So as we drill down into what people need specifically, they'll have a variant that works well for them.
Great. So the last section of our survey here is around people and culture, right? You can't have DevOps with just tools and technology. People and culture are important too. So as you know, I've said that we've extended this survey to get a better understanding of how teams are working together as part of this overall DevOps culture. And in terms of collaboration, we've asked teams, do their dev, QA, ops, et cetera, business partners collaborate to define or plan user stories for upcoming work? And it was a resounding yes. So 73% said yes, they do collaborate across cross-functional teams. So Tracy, this one again is for you, and I'll let others chime in as well. The Jenkins community thrives on cross-functional collaboration. So are we seeing open source practices sort of making their way into the enterprise, noting that many of these respondents work in big companies, as we saw in our 1,000+ IT employee stat?
Yes, no, definitely hope so. With even, I think there's the term inner source that enterprises started adopting, where they'll use the practices that sort of came out of open source. But yeah, it's a really good sign of just having the cross-functional teams, which make for much better operations going forward. And that's certainly consistent with the folks we're talking to in the community, and certainly how we've got things set up.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that's consistent with us internally. One of the names we kind of have for it is social coding. It's been a really interesting couple of years, and I've kind of touched on this before, but the people we hire are used to such a different development paradigm than, not that we even do waterfall, but like that the way that most of the game development works, that we've seen a lot of these open source development practices start being almost a limiting factor. You know, people would arrive and be like, okay, so you're using these tools, but why wouldn't you work this way? And so we've started seeing not necessarily resistance, but pressure to actually start adopting those things, even for, you know, not necessarily like the business reasons normally associated with open source adoption. So even if we weren't using those, I'm saying that the development practices have really started to permeate the engineering mindset.
And we do a lot of consulting for companies that the business has finally seen the value of collaborating earlier in the process, getting the user stories, getting that feedback, you know, whether you're going agile, and so they're getting it every sprint, every 2 weeks, things like that. And they're seeing the success of those type of efforts. And so they're all in. It's not a foreign concept anymore. It's no longer, you know, the business versus technology. It's now, yes, we are one big happy team, collaborate better. And that's part of the cultural changes we try to focus on. And one of the reasons we break out that the DevOps org is to make sure that collaboration like that is working when we work with clients.
So Lester, maybe you can go one deeper on this next stat too. So when we surveyed, we asked, is the security team involved during development? And 51% said, yes, we are involved during development. And I actually found this number to be quite high, and higher than I expected. And I don't know if that's due to the majority of survey respondents being developers. So developers are believing that they're really in lockstep with the security team. And I'd be interested next year to do a data slice on if security professionals believe that they are that involved. But when you look at this data, Lester, is 51% enough? And if it's not enough, why is it so important for security to be more involved?
Well, I don't think it's enough. I think that we would all like to see that number higher. I think one of the things you'll see as the trends go is that number will get higher. One of the goals we always have when we work with the clients is, have you talked to your security team? Are they involved at the beginning of the process? Have you been thinking about security the entire time? I mean, you just look at the news from this week, right? 500 million accounts hacked at Marriott, right? So security can't be left out, and as developers understand that, and we get a better security mindset, you're going to see that number go up. It's a very important function that we would like to see participate in the very beginning. Make sure they're with the architecture and you're thinking about security the whole time you're doing it. And it's like the DBAs, it should become just a core part of your team. And in the future, I think that's where we will be.
Great.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's what the no means. The no means, oh, the security starts with developers. Of course, we're on top of it. Maybe it's wishful thinking.
Right.
I don't know if that's what that no means or not.
Well, this number's in stark contrast to the earlier stats on, you know, people automating security as parts of their Jenkins process. So it suggests there's still a disconnect, even though there's involvement, right? So there's way more involvement than are tied to automation. So that's the good news, but it does have to increase.
Well, I mean, there's a good point there, right? I think one pulls the other forward. I think by the security guys being involved earlier, I don't know how their practices work at every other company, but I know a lot of them here are, for lack of a better word, downstream. They're a bit black box. It goes to them and they tell us what we need to do about it. But I think, you know, we've started seeing it, and it's where that other number is, you know, half of this, which is they know they can't be that way anymore. I don't think they have any interest in being black box. Certainly a big change that I've seen here is, you know, not just that they're more involved, but they're more aware of what the upstream development practices actually look like. And so it's been a very positive and healthy change. And like I said, this is another one of those places where I'm confident if we keep asking this question every year, we'll keep seeing that trend go up and up and up, and hopefully it'll get to whatever Lester would be happy with.
100%.
75 at least.
So kind of along these same lines of, is it enough? We asked an interesting question. We asked, do developers have visibility into application monitoring or observability tools to get feedback on and inform changes? And 61% of respondents said that yes, developers do have access to APM, application performance management type tools, and observability tools, observability being a fairly new and exciting space to get feedback and inform changes. Is this an indication of a shift left and completing a feedback loop? So Josh, first question for you, how important is production or runtime feedback in CD and DevOps? Do you see observability solutions playing a big increased role in developers day to day?
Absolutely. I mean, even your point about this sort of being a new field, that really caught me off guard. We've been doing it for so long that that I hadn't thought of it as new. I'm used to in many ways we're behind some of the standard industry practices, and so it was exciting to see a place where we're winning. Yeah, this is essential to the way that we go. And anyone who's heard me speak before will have probably heard this anecdote, but at least for games, and I suspect it's true of a lot of people's software, it doesn't matter how many hours of QA you throw at this before you do that launch. Your users are going to put way more time into this than you'll ever be able to meaningfully test. I mean, a game is an excellent example. For some of the big titles, we might be able to do 2 million hours of testing on this thing before we do a release. But if we have 2 million players, they just beat that in an hour. So they're going to find stuff that there was just no chance that we could ever do. And we can be smarter and do more automation and things. I'm not suggesting that, but it's one of those. You're trying to fight the battle, you're trying to win the battle before it started, and these observability tools give you that chance to go, okay, I've hit this confidence bar, which is where I'm sure this is good, but I'm not just going to throw it over the fence and hope for the best. I've got a chance to see what's still happening. So just from the QA side of thing, I think it shifts the burden to an appropriate place and keeps the feedback going. And then tying to what I was saying before about, the bigger games probably needing to be more like the smaller, more frequent releases you see in mobile games, it enables that ability to go, I'm pretty sure this is what you want. I'm excited about this, but take a look at this and let's kind of finish it together. And really the ability to do that is entirely through these observability tools. What are people liking? What's resonating? The worst thing we can do as a company is invest tons of hours into storylines or characters or levels that people just have no interest in, especially if we've underinvested in the ones that they love.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating. I've come from the perspective that observability was a new thing. So yeah, really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I think it fits in a little bit with a new mantra that says you build it, you own it kind of stuff. I think there's a new movement towards developers just being more closely connected to how things are running in production because it's theirs, right? And I think the days are gone a little bit where that's an ops problem now, right? We're trying to bridge that gap. That's what we're all trying to do. So yeah, I think this is very fitting and very, very telling.
Well, even on the ops side, I guess I just thought of sort of a more of how we develop our internal services rather than just those end games. As my team has become more DevOps, and as I've seen more of the other teams do it, we find we're putting a lot more conscious thought into the tools that we're supporting, and what tools we shouldn't be. And so we've needed to start instrumenting our own tools because it's, okay, we've got these 10 things. Can I deprecate this? How mad are people going to be if I kill this off? And so we're at the level where we need the observability tools internally so we can come back and go, yes, I know, Tim, you're going to be angry that I turn this off, but it's just you using this. We can't afford to support this.
So you know how mad everyone's going to be. That's good.
It's an important business decision, right? Especially in a case like ours, where we're a central team. We're there to enable what everybody else is doing. It's a really key factor.
Yeah. So operation level's low. That's okay. Go for it. That's good.
Apologies, I'm clicking through slides here. Here we go. So I've got this fantastic Apple Magic Mouse that is very sensitive and does all kinds of things all by itself. So a couple of commentary from the community. So we always ask an open-ended question to the community when we do these surveys, because it's a great chance for us to solicit feedback and see what we need to work on. And so I pulled a couple of interesting questions and observations that I'd like to pose to the group. And Tracy, if you want to lead the charge here, since you are kind of our designated community person for this call. So the number one, the first thing was, I think there's a place to share the shared library would be really great to mutualize work. Also, dynamic forms with fields that appear depending on selection would be good so that non-developer users can use Jenkins more easily. Today, they are a bit afraid of the UI. How would we tackle that question?
Yeah, no, I love the community because they're always really happy to give feedback and give really good feedback. So I think, yeah, while looking at all three of these things, I think the things we're sort of well aware of, and there's various initiatives within the community, certainly ease of use. On the second one, the installation and configuration, there's a great initiative now, configuration as code, so it lets you specify not just Jenkins itself, but the various plugins, and people who are using that are just finding it simply amazing. And it sort of solves that problem of you don't have to go clicking around in the UI to get things set up. So you can just have everything in code and just get it going and reproduce it. And yeah, it's kind of amazing that the whole kind of infrastructure is code. And yeah, initiatives as well on kind of dealing with, you know, the blessing and curse of the plugins. So certainly CloudBees as a program where they'll test a whole set of plugins, about 1,500 for compatibility, and the community will benefit from that testing. That's, you know, it is open source, so we like saying, you know, the community is the capacity. So love for more people to get involved and just drive initiatives on this. But I would say that there's a lot happening to address these areas.
Yeah, I would definitely add to the you know, configuration as code that you know, I have an aspirational goal that I think we experience the same, people being a bit afraid of the UI. Let's get people right out of there. I mean, I'm happy to have it for users who are unfamiliar with the paradigms as something to sort of provide them some gates to help sort of learn how to do CI well. But for any of our advanced users, let's just get them right out of there. Everything should be as code.
Great. So I think that we've come to the point where we can spend a little time taking some questions for the audience. And we do have a couple of good ones here. So first question that came up is, what do your teams / companies use for reporting and metrics? Who wants to take that one?
I can go first. A variety of tools. Vast majority of them are bespoke. I mean, even to the point of what I would say, actually, I was going to say we have some, you know, dashboards that we built on top of Jenkins, but that's unfair to Jenkins. It's not a shortcoming of that. It's more like, you know, we started building, you know, message queues to be able to throw data from all of the various systems that are happening, and then sort of collating the data that way. And you know, the dream for us is to provide an experience to the developer such that when they commit, there's something immediately giving them feedback, not just here's what Jenkins did for you, here's everything that happened downstream of that commit, and here's how we're tying this together to help you do your job faster. So it's not just, hey, there's a broken build, you know, hey, this is likely the cause of that broken build, things like that. But right now, mostly bespoke for at least the CI/CD type reporting, but then for things like monitoring, standard tools, right? Zabbix, these types of things.
Sure. Anybody else on monitoring, reporting, metrics?
I always think back to like a 8-year-old article now or whatever. It goes back to the beginnings of this at Etsy, is anything that moves, you should be measuring it, right? So if it's going to move, you should be measuring it so you see how it's moving. And if you have things that you don't think should be moving, you should measure that too and make sure they're not moving. Simple example being, and I remember this in my early days too, is just keeping track of how many milliseconds your database calls take and keeping a close eye on that, because you can add 10 milliseconds, not notice it in your testing, and have profound impact at scale in prod. So you want to, you want to have stuff like that in place. but obviously each team has to sort of figure this out. There's not a canonical set of things you need to just be monitoring. I'll also add, we in terms of security and stuff, little plug for our side. People should be looking at their dependencies, and in this age of security problems, you need to know what's in your software, what versions of what libraries you're using, because there's a lot of known bad ones out there, and without any visibility or ability to monitor those, it's way too easy to make the headlines in the business journals for all the wrong reasons, and so that's another important aspect that hopefully is emerging. This is sort of a relatively new discipline, but I think it's getting a lot of visibility.
Yeah, adding to that, especially as you move closer and closer to containers. They kind of just work so well, it's really easy to be thinking, oh, what versions are all those things on? Are those good versions? And so being able to automate some scans around that to be able to give you that heads up that, hey, this version is known to have an issue is super necessary.
Yeah, and containers are awesome because the thing you have is the thing that moves. You're not sort of going out to pre-provisioned environments where no two of them are the same. So you actually are in a really good position to really manage that problem well.
Yeah, I'm also going to throw in just the CloudBees DevOptics, and there's a free plugin people can try out with Jenkins. So yeah, that's a good one for monitoring.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I was just about to give our own shameless plug since Curtis started, right?
Well, what does that measure? What sort of stuff does that measure?
Well,
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay, I'll go. So it's DevOps performance metrics. So it'll measure things like throughput. It'll help you understand where your queues are getting blocked, so you can actually map your value streams and see where things aren't moving like they should be moving, so that you can start to do some root cause analysis around fixing those things. So, it's nice to get visibility that says, hey, this is wrong, but it's better to get visibility that says, hey, this is what's wrong, and if you fix it, things will become better.
Nice.
Yeah, so, and that works with Jenkins, by the way, too. So not just for CloudBees customers, that will sit on Jenkins just beautifully. Next question was, the panel has said that the terms of CI/CD are well defined, but when you read multiple articles, you will see both continuous delivery and continuous deployment. Yeah, so this I think goes to the question of CD versus CD. Which one is it? Who wants to tackle that one?
I'm looking at Josh.
I'm looking at you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think this question is indicative of some of the confusion, because the question suggests that the fact that both terms exist means that we don't have a good definition, even though I would define them differently. But so to me, this is a little bit of inception in this question, in that that exists. Now, again, to me, as a delivery team, if I release software and go put it somewhere and it's available to be released and it doesn't get released, that's delivery. Deployment means it magically just goes into prod, right? It automatically goes to prod. And just a lot of folks aren't there yet, right? But so I don't think there's confusion until you boil it down to CD, like Josh said. Now, then no one knows what you're talking about.
Which is what we tend to do when we start talking about it, right? So I don't know, maybe exactly. Maybe next survey we can put okay, let's resolve this finally. We're going to rebrand one of them. Which one do you want to rebrand? And we'll just go with that after. We can email Jez and write a new book. Put this in it, please.
So we do have a couple more questions here, but I did want to just, for everyone who's still hanging out with us, we do have some time to take a couple more, so feel free to pop those in the chat window and we'll keep going. Next question was, you might have covered this, but what is the population size of the survey numbers you are showing? So I'll take that one. The survey respondents this year were 1,076 respondents. With over 5,000 total respondents over the last 5 years. So the survey is roughly 1,000 a year. We're targeting 1,200, so we were just a tiny bit shy this year, but next year we're going to get it. Statistically, this should bring the margin of error within that plus or minus 3 points. So if you are asking for statistical significance, the sample size is large enough to be statistically significant. Next question was, how can you say cloud-hosted Jenkins is 73%, when public cloud is only 22%, and the rest are private, VM, or cloud, basically VMs. A good question.
It sounds cynical to me, right? Like, so you're saying private cloud is really just VMs, which I think sort of misses the point. But it's clearly 22% plus 17% public and hybrid. Those two add up, to cloud adoption. So if you want to split hairs at all, you're maybe splitting hair about private cloud. And if you think that's just VMs, then maybe it's not clear to you what that is. But I don't know. To me, the numbers add up, but I see where it's coming from. I feel it's a cynical question.
Yeah, and I think that this question too, and I would have to double check, but I believe this was a multi-select question. So you'll find a lot of people who have, maybe they have AWS, but they also have VMs in their environment, and that's very normal. So the numbers may have been skewed just a bit that way as well. Where can I get a copy of the report? We will be sending that out in a follow-up email, so you will have your very own copy of this report to use as you see fit, and we'll be doing some additional white papers and analysis around this in the coming months. Do you see product management joining the DevOps journey? Lester, let's have you take this one. This is a good one.
I hope so. But yes, we actually, when we go into clients, one of the things we try to do is get product management involved. Road mapping and understanding where the product is going is very helpful for developers to understand early, so that you can kind of plan for the future, especially when you're architecting out your environments. And then if you want to throw the security piece on top of it, it's even better. Hey, we suddenly want to offer this as a mobile app in a few years. Well, start thinking about what kind of security you might need in that area. So yes, we want the product managers in there. We actually have them included in our sprint teams as we go to clients and help build them out.
And if I may for a second, DevOps is very holistic, and it doesn't stop with product management. I think, procurement, finance, I think all sorts of roles that we don't think of as being traditionally tied to this are going to join the DevOps journey. And that's sort of the point of DevOps and as it leads into digital transformation.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. Tracy, this next one looks like it's just for you. When will automating Jenkins configuration be available?
So the configuration as code, that's available now. They've had their first release this year, and the initial feedback from folks who are trying it, I think there's some folks at CD-Spends who had some really good feedback. I know it doesn't support all the plugins because they did have to go in and take care of all the different quirks around various plugins, but it's a long way there for most use cases. So yeah, go check it out.
Fantastic. So I think that's going to wrap up all the Q&A that we have for today. I just wanted to give one last shout out to our wonderful panelists. You see that their logos from all the companies that they are from here up on the screen. Tracy, thanks from the Jenkins community, Sonotype, Electronic Arts, Zebra. We're just so happy to have you guys talking with us and lending your expertise. And I've really enjoyed the panel, and I hope everybody has found it very informative and maybe also fun. You never know. So I think that will conclude our panel for today. Thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah, this is Charlene just jumping in here. Kristen, thanks for moderating such a great panel. You guys did a great job. Just a quick reminder to the audience before we conclude today's webinar that today's webinar has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to listen to it again, you will have the opportunity to listen to it on demand. Sometime this afternoon, we'll be sending out an email that will include a link to the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be on the devops.com website under the webinars section on demand. So if you're on the site, feel free to check it out there. And while you're looking for that webinar on demand, check out the other webinars that we have, both upcoming and on demand. Hopefully there'll be one or two at least that pique your interest. So again, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great webinar today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.